Chapter 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Soul Society, Siriidii, 1st Division Barracks. The sound of soldiers training filled the air as Uehara Shiraha stretched and slowly got out of bed. After pulling on his Shinigami uniform, he glanced at his task panel, like he always did. Yep, today's task had refreshed. Visiting old friends, daily task. The wind's got a good howl today, perfect for a drink. Invite a friend for some conversation in sake. Reward, random attribute +2, simple panel, simple task, solid reward, typical of his system, laid back and chill, just like him. Back in the day, Uehara Shiraha was just a regular Joe. Over 20 years ago, he'd inexplicably wound up in the world of Bleach as a Rukongai kid. Uehara Shiraha knew the Bleach manga well enough. The Soul Society was home to countless spirits. Those without spiritual pressure were just lost souls, vulnerable to obliteration. Those with spiritual pressure had the potential to become soul reapers. Soul reapers with potent spiritual pressure could live for millennia and become the ruling class of the Soul Society, but Uehara Shiraha knew even mastering Bankai wouldn't guarantee safety. Even as a captain, the Soul Society was prone to disaster. Aizen's betrayal, then the Quincy King Yawatch, soul reapers were dropping like flies. Even Captain Yamamoto, the strongest soul reaper, bit the dust. If it wasn't for Ichigo Kurosaki's incredible power, the Soul Society would have been wiped out. In a world this dangerous, he needed the power to protect himself. Luckily, when he crossed over, Uehara Shiraha discovered he had a natural talent for spiritual pressure, enough to become a soul reaper. And he wasn't half bad at it either. More importantly, he had a golden ticket. He'd activated a task system after crossing over, simple as could be. The tasks were just as simple, 2 types only. First, a daily task like visiting old friends, occurring once a day, offering random rewards like boosts to spiritual pressure or skill proficiency. Second, a special task that triggered randomly. These offered more substantial rewards, abilities and equipment from other anime and movies. For example, when Uehara Shiraha first arrived in Rukongai, he got the special task, touring Rukongai. Easily completing that, he snagged the Shadow Clone technique from the world of Naruto. Thanks to the system, Uehara Shiraha confidently enrolled in the Spiritual Arts Academy and became a Soul Reaper trainee. Then he started leisurely completing daily tasks and occasionally using Shadow Clones to tutor. More than 20 years flew by, and Uehara Shiraha's strength and status were totally different. On the surface, his talent and strength were slightly worse than geniuses like Jin Ikamaru, Kaien Shiba, and Byakuya Kachiki, but in reality, his displayed strength was just the tip of the iceberg. Thinking about this, Uehara Shiraha opened his character panel. Name, Uehara Hakuha, position, 1st Division, 7th seat, Ryatsu, 3rd class spiritual power, captain level, Zanpakuto, Danku, 2nd stage Shirkai, swordsmanship, vice captain level. Hand-to-hand combat, senior officer level, Kido, captain level, flash step, vice captain level. Abilities, Point 1. Shadow Clone technique, B-class ability, mastered, Point 2. Stand, White Album, S-class ability, mastered, Point 3. Breathing technique, sun breathing, B-class ability, proficient. Items, Point 1. Disguise glasses, B-class item, Kryptonian creation, Point 2. 5 Thunder curse, C-class item, cultivation talisman, Point 3. Death gloves, D-class item, extraordinary creation. Ability and item levels, D-class, C-class, B-class, A-class, S-class, SR-class, EX-class. Proficiency levels, entry level, proficient, mastered, perfect, complete, perfect. After joining the academy, Uehara Shiraha had completed a special mission and obtained the S-level ability, White Album. White Album was a non-corporeal stand from Part 5 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, wielded by Gyacho of the Assassination Squad. Its ability was to generate extreme cold, freezing the air to create external armor, even reaching absolute zero to freeze anything. 3 years after getting his initial Zanpakuto, Uehara Shiraha had successfully awakened it, naming it Danku. Danku's ability was similar to Tsuchiko-san's eye technique, a complete version of both eyes combined. Because there were so many old-timers in the Soul Society, Uehara Shiraha announced his Zanpakuto was called White Season and that it had the power to create ultra-low temperatures, freezing things nearby. Since he'd achieved Shikai at the academy, Uehara Shiraha was labeled a genius and joined the First Division as their top graduate. The First Division, being under the direct command of the Captain Commander, offered the best treatment, the highest status, and the fiercest competition, to test the genius. Recruit. Several officers of the First Division challenged Hakuha Uehara to a duel. Hakuha Uehara, who wanted nothing more than to take it easy, dealt with the challengers casually, but before he could even break a sweat, they were down for the count. Then, he inexplicably became the 7th seat of the First Division, a minor executive role within the Godi I-13, with possibly hundreds of Soul Reapers per division. Being an officer, especially the 7th seat, in the First Division meant you were definitely someone to be reckoned with. However, Hakuha Uehara didn't have any grand ambitions. In his past life, he'd had his fill of the grind. Now, he just wanted to quietly complete tasks and live peacefully, no overtime. Not in this lifetime. He'd rather find Shunsui Kairaku, that old lek, and grab a drink, completing his daily task on the side. Hakuha Uehara sauntered out of the barracks. His laid-back attitude contrasted sharply with the hard-working officers nearby. Seeing Hakuha Uehara, several officers just sighed in exasperation. Uehara Shiraha had proven his genius through his strength. Genius Soul Reapers always got a free pass. Ordinary soldiers looked at the young 7th seat with admiration, awe, and envy. He'd become a high-ranking officer of the First Division before 40, and rumor had it he was on good terms with heavy hitters like the 8th Division captain. He was just from Rukongai, but he was stronger than many noble Soul Reapers. Talk about inspiring. Meanwhile, in the godly space exclusive to Danku, for Shadow Clones were tirelessly practicing Zenjutsu, Hakuda, Onmitsu, and Hoho. Being a time traveler, Uehara Shiraha naturally understood the potential of the Shadow Clone technique. Even though it was only a B-class ability, its support effect was comparable to an S-class skill. This was Naruto's exclusive plugin, a magical technique for training and learning. When a Shadow Clone was dispelled, the main body inherited the experience and memories. This was ideal for training in the 4 basic Soul Reaper arts. A skilled Shadow Clone technique allowed for the creation of 1 clone, mastery level allowed for 2, and so on. This was equivalent to 4 extra bodies that could practice indefinitely. Relying on this technique alone, Uehara Shiraha was confident he could master all 4 arts. Mastering these arts required considerable time, hundreds or even thousands of years for regular Soul Reapers. The reason Uehara Shiraha managed to do it in just over 20 years was all down to his hard work, and his Shadow Clone cheat. Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Feeling the Shadow Clone intensely training nearby, Uehara Shiraha's expression relaxed completely. He quickly walked to the 8th Division headquarters. The 1st Division led the 13th Division, relayed Central 46's decrees, and held regular meetings. The 8th Division gathered intel, tracked data from the 80 districts of Rukongai, and collected information from other divisions. They were the 1st Division's eyes and ears. Because of this, the 1st and 8th Divisions worked closely together. This required a full-time liaison, a role Uehara Shiraha filled. Over the years, Shiraha had a lot of contact with the 8th Division's captain, Kairaku Shunsui. They discovered a shared personality, temperament, and hobbies. They quickly became good friends. After a few visits, Shiraha grew close to Shunsui and they often grabbed drinks, unlike Shuansui's lecherous tendencies. Shiraha was just there to study Soul Society culture and complete his work. Shiraha easily reached the 8th Division captain's office without incident. Seeing him, Shunsui pretended to be busy, then greeted him enthusiastically. Shiraha. You made it? What's that? Drinks? No way, Lisa will kill me. Why did you open the wine? That's the good stuff, I got it from that old hermit. Fine, 1 glass, and that's it. Half a day later, Lisa Yamru, finally done with her work, rushed back to the 8th Division. She noticed the soldiers giving her weird looks. Lisa's heart sank. Could it be? Not him again. She flashed into Shuansui's office. She found her captain singing a drunken, off-color song, and that Uehara Shiraha was smiling, looking totally at ease. Seeing the 2 drunks enjoying themselves, Lisa clenched her fists, remembering all the work she had to do because they were slacking off. Lisa, normally so calm and collected, couldn't help but yell, "Captain, be responsible for once." And it's work hours, no drinking. Shiroha deftly passed the buck. Not my fault, I just opened the bottle. Shunsui smiled sheepishly. Hey, Shiroha, no need to worry. I was just caught up in the moment, so I'll punish myself with 3 more cups, and then, no more. Seriously? The usually quiet, pigtail-wearing girl with glasses turned into a demon, radiating a terrifying aura. You two, stop it right now. Seeing Lisa draw her Zanpakuto, Taijian Longling, Uehara Shiraha bolted without hesitation. As for Shunsui begging for help behind him, Shiraha could only wish him luck. Better him than me, right? Anyway, he drank the wine, finished his task, mission complete. As soon as he left the 8th division, he received a system notification. Congratulations on completing the daily task and gaining +1 spiritual pressure and +1 sun breathing proficiency. After 2 points of attributes, Uehara Shiraha's spiritual pressure improved slightly. In the world of death, spiritual pressure is everything. A Shinigami's power is defined by their spiritual pressure. Those with stronger spiritual pressure dominate those with weaker spiritual pressure. A single look can vaporize the weak. Aizen, for example, used his overwhelming spiritual pressure like a king's haki to intimidate weaker opponents. In the world of death, if your spiritual pressure is strong enough, you can do whatever you want, and the stronger the spiritual pressure, the longer a Shinigami's lifespan, the longer you live, the more tasks Uehara Shiraha can complete. The stronger his spiritual pressure, and the longer he can live. It's a perfect closed loop, even if Uehara Shiraha's spiritual pressure talent isn't as abnormal as Aizen's. Task rewards let him infinitely boost his power. This is the realm Aizen dreamed of. The reward also boosted his sun breathing proficiency, giving Shiraha a much better understanding of the 12 sword forms. Just completing a daily task made him significantly stronger. That's the power of the task system. As long as Uehara Shiraha lives long enough and consistently does his tasks, he'll naturally become stronger. In the Bleach world, level 20 spiritual power is about average team member. Only level 10 and up qualifies you as a seated officer. Level 8 lets you perform a Shirkai release. Levels 4 and 5 are vice captain level. Level 3 is regular captain level. More importantly, a Shinigami with level 3 spiritual pressure can live for 1,000 years. With just daily tasks, Uehara Shiraha can easily max out all his stats. Can you stand up to 1,000,000 daily tasks? Back at the 8th division, Kairaku Shunsui was clearing up. Yamaru, Lisa, the vice-captain of the 8th division, used her physical sobering skills more and more efficiently. Lisa glared at the direction Uehara Shiraha ran, grumbling, he sure got off easy. Kairaku Shunsui sighed, I didn't know you two were so close. It's great to be young. Though Uehara Shiraha was born in Rukongai, he was more attractive and refined than noble heirs like Kachiki Byakuya and Shiba Kaien. Uehara Shiraha was popular in the Soul Society and very desirable. Many female Shinigami liked the handsome Uehara Shiraha, and it seemed their vice-captain was too. We're just friends from a bookstore, don't get the wrong idea. Lisa Yamaru adjusted her glasses, looking calm. Lisa Yamaru often went to the bookstore, and now Lisa Yamaru is still a very serious literary girl. She has not been dazzled by the photo idol collections of the world, and she only reads serious books. Then, Uehara Shiraha would come to the bookstore from time to time to buy books, and they became familiar with each other. Kairaku Shunsui looked surprised. Really? Just bookstore friends? Lisa Yamaru looked at Kairaku Shunsui like he was a bug, then shook her pigtails and left. Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Near the 8th Division's HQ, Shiraha Uehara was already mapping out his evening. Even though it was still pretty early, he spotted a soldier from the 8th Division briefing a familiar female Soul Reaper. It was Nanao Ise, the 8th Division's 10th seat, instantly recognizable by her glasses and the book she always carried. She was also Shunsui Kairaku's niece and a close friend of Shiraha. Like Lisa, they'd bonded over books. The soldier finished up and quickly left, leaving Nanao alone. Shiraha strolled over to say hi, but seeing Nanao's serious face, Shiraha was intrigued. Something up? He asked. Nanao turned to him, her expression grave. Something's happened in the Rukongai district. The 12th Division just discovered that a huge number of civilians have gone missing in the last month. They've reported it to the Captain Commander. She continued, an advance team of 10 Soul Reapers has already been dispatched. Every division's been notified. While Rukongai civilians weren't exactly considered irreplaceable, a mass disappearance like this was bound to raise eyebrows among the Godii 13, the balance of spirits across Soul Society, the human world, Hueco Mundo, and even hell had to be maintained. Too many or too few in any one place could throw the whole Shinigami world into chaos. That's why the Captain Commander had sent 10 Soul Reapers to investigate right away. Hearing Nanao's explanation, Shiraha immediately realized what was happening. Perfect timing, As if on cue, his system chimed in with a new notification. Witness the birth of the Visored, Special Mission 7. On a full moon night, someone in the Rukong district is secretly conducting scientific research. Investigate and witness the creation of the Visored firsthand. Reward, random ability or item. Daily missions are great for steady progress, a marathon to build strength. Special missions are like hitting the jackpot. Get lucky, and you might snag an EX level ability and become unstoppable. But special missions have to be triggered, and it seems that the best trigger is to get involved in the main story. Until he was truly invincible, he wouldn't be messing with the core plot too much. Happy to have a mission. Shiraha gave Nanao a reassuring smile. Don't sweat it, he said. Everything will be fine. With the Captain Commander and the Central 46 running things, Soul Society's going to keep prospering in peace and harmony. Nanao eyed him skeptically. Something about Shiraha's words felt off. The words themselves were fine, but the way he said them just felt wrong. She couldn't put her finger on it. They parted ways, and Shiraha, humming a little tune, skipped back to his place, feeling pretty good. The First Division got the best perks. High-ranking officers like him got their own house, complete with a small courtyard. Okay, so his wasn't quite as big as some of the captains, but it was plenty of room to practice swordsmanship. Even if he usually practiced indoors, that was because he'd rigged the entire house with multiple layers of powerful spirit barriers. They weren't quite as strong as the barrier protecting Soul Society itself, but they were more than enough to block any kind of surveillance. After all, the Technology Development Bureau was still relatively new, and Aizen's little research project was just hitting its stride. They didn't have all the fancy tech yet. Shiraha wasn't just being careful about Aizen, though. He was keeping an eye out for the Wandenrake too. He still remembered everything that happened with Yawatch. During the 1000-Year Blood War, Captain Commander Yamamoto went all out with his Ryujin Jaka Bankai in the final moments, only to have it stolen by Yawatch a split second later. Talk about a peaceful passing. His ashes were scattered, and that was it. Back in his room, Shiraha focused his spiritual pressure. The dankong on his waist glowed with a faint white light. In an instant, the entire room was enveloped in an invisible spatial force. Now that's secure. Shiraha sat down in the lotus position, placed dankong on his knees, and began his daily blade meditation. The Zanpakuto of a Soul Reaper was their most prized possession. It was like the sacred treasure of an immortal. That made a good Zanpakuto extremely important. Without something like Kyoka Suigetsu, Aizen never could have manipulated everyone the way he did. Of course, it helped that Aizen had crazy spiritual pressure and raw power. In the hands of anyone else, Kyoka Suigetsu wouldn't have been able to hypnotize an entire squad of Soul Reaper captains. After the 1000-Year Blood War, Tokunada Tsuneyoshiro used the artifact in Reikyoden to replicate Kyoka Suigetsu, but it wasn't even in the same league as Aizen's version. There was no comparison, but the power of a Zanpakuto also depended on how well you knew it. After all, the Zanpakuto of a Soul Reaper was a physical manifestation of their soul. It was intrinsically connected to their mind, will, personality, and experiences. Shirkai and Bankai were basically transformations and sublimations of a Soul Reaper's mind, will, and even their soul. That's why spiritual pressure and strength skyrocketed after achieving them. A Soul Reaper who had mastered Bankai was on a completely different level from one who hadn't. Don't let the original story fool you. Bankai might seem common, Ichigo even learned it in 3 days, but every Soul Reaper who can use Bankai is a freaking big deal in Soul Society and the Seriidii. Blade meditation was a way to train with a Zanpakuto. The technique had been practiced in Soul Society for thousands of years. It wasn't easy. It required absolute focus. channeling all of your energy into the Zanpakuto. If you got good enough, you could communicate directly with your Zanpakuto, which helped a ton with controlling it and mastering Bankai. Thanks to his Shadow Clone technique, mastering blade meditation wasn't a problem for Shiraha. He closed his eyes and began to meditate. As Shiraha's mind quieted, Donkong's snowy light intensified. Almost blinding, his consciousness began to sync with Donkong's. After a while, Shiraha felt much closer to his Zanpakuto. He looked at the now calm Dankong in his hand and nodded in satisfaction. It looked like an ancient longsword, radiating a reserved aura and focused energy. While a Soul Reaper's Zanpakuto was always called a sword, it could take pretty much any form after being released. It could be a sword, spear, saber, halberd, axe, hook, fork, or some kind of crazy-looking weapon. In terms of style, Shiraha's was nothing special. Ancient and dignified was the best way to describe it, but Donkong's ability? That was straight up OP. Chapter 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uehara Hakuha's Dankong, a system reward, is the perfect ability for him with limitless potential. Dankong Shirkai has 2 stages. The first stage is a permanent Shirkai, so his Zanpakuto is always in the Shirkai state. Uehara Hakuha can phase into a hollow state at will, rendering him invulnerable. However, like Kamui, he can't attack while hollow. Although maintaining the hollow state drains spiritual pressure, the drain is minimal. Ordinarily, Uehara Hakuha's massive spiritual pressure means he could stay hollow for days. Uchiha Obito made a name for himself in the ninja world by going intangible for 5 minutes at a time. Hakuha's got no cooldown. The power of Dankong is terrifying. What's more, Uehara Hakuha can also use the second stage of Shirkai. However, he has to activate the second stage. The second stage overlaps Dankong's space with a section of the real world, allowing him to cut through space and wound people invisibly. Think of it as a combination of Law's Room and Kakashi's Kamui, only stronger. So, things like steel skin, spiritual pressure defenses, or even barriers are useless against the second stage of Dankong's Shirkai. They offer no protection. It's an unblockable attack and an impenetrable defense. That's Dankong. And that's just the Shirkai. Dankong after Bankai will be even more powerful, but Uehara Bayu's Bankai training has just begun. Although his spiritual pressure is at the 3rd level, it's not enough to complete the training. However, Uehara Bayu isn't worried. With the task system, Bankai is just a matter of time. As it got late, Uehara Bayu began to collect the results of the day's Shadow Clone training. He clearly perceived an enormous space in his mind. This is Dankong's personal space. It's as big as a large city. That's much larger than Brother Tsuchi's Kamui space. The 4 Shadow Clones can train freely in this space, with plenty of room to practice even the most powerful techniques. Then, Uehara Bayu had an idea. In the space, the Shadow Clone practicing swordsmanship shattered and disappeared. The memories and experiences of its swordsmanship training flooded Uehara Bayu's mind. He carefully absorbed these memories and experiences. Soon, Uehara Bayu felt his swordsmanship improve slightly. This effect is similar to the swordsmanship +1 reward from the system. Then Uehara Bayu released the Shadow Clones practicing Kido, Shuinpa, and Hakutatsu one by one. Just like that, his swordsmanship, Kido, Shuinpa, and Hakutatsu all improved noticeably. If other Soul Reapers knew that Uehara Bayu could get stronger while sleeping, even the captains would be jealous. The next day, Uehara Bayu checked his daily tasks as usual. Walking, daily task. Take a walk after dinner. When you're 99, you decide to stroll the streets and be a street urchin. Reward, random attribute +2. Uehara Bayu couldn't help but complain. For a Soul Reaper, living to 99 isn't longevity, it's premature death. Daily tasks are simple and can be completed easily. There's no penalty for failure. Easy power-ups, comfortable and carefree. Uehara Shiraha left his courtyard to complete a temporary task. Before leaving, he visited the vice-captain of the first squad, Chojiro Sasakaibe. This old man with white hair and golden eyes is no joke. Thousands of years ago, Yawatch, the ancestor of the Quincy, led an invasion of the Soul Society. With the Soul Society on the brink of destruction, Chojiro Sasakaibe crawled out of a pile of corpses and stabbed Yawatch in the back. Captain General Yamamoto seized the opportunity to finish Yawatch off. The two saved the Soul Society together. After that, the Godei 13 grew stronger, and Captain General Yamamoto's prestige and influence increased daily. Chojiro Sasakaibe swore to serve under Captain General Yamamoto for life, so even though he had the strength and qualifications, he stayed in the first squad instead of becoming captain of another. After meeting with Sasakaibe, Uehara Shiraha reported some recently obtained intelligence. He knew that some of the information was outdated or inaccurate, but you gotta play the game. You can slack off, but only in certain situations. You can be lazy in front of subordinates, but you gotta kiss up to the boss. As long as you hang around the higher-ups, you're a model employee. Sure enough, Sasakaibe nodded approvingly, looking at Uehara Shiraha with relief. People say Uehara Shiraha is arrogant and irresponsible. He's hard-working. As for frequenting the red light district and being a young playboy, that's not a big deal. People like Kairaku are beyond help. At that moment, Kairaku Shunsui, far away in the 8th squad, felt a chill. He wondered, did the fishing and drinking get out? Nah, old man Yama is used to it. Maybe I'm just too charming and some ladies are missing me. Annoying. The Soul Society is in the center of Soul Society. It's huge, about 130,000 square soul miles, with a radius of about 365 soul miles. Karakura Town, population 100,000, has a radius of only 1 soul mile, so the Soul Society is ridiculously large. It takes ordinary souls 40 days to walk around the perimeter. The interior is arranged in a circle by huge streets. Its exterior is made of walls of sekiseki stone. The invisible waves released by the stones break down spiritual power. These waves form a circular shield around the Soul Society, preventing spirits from entering. There are 4 gates in the east, south, west, and north, each guarded by a powerful Soul Reaper. Civilians aren't allowed to enter. Uehara Shiraha was strolling near the White Road Gate. The buildings here are simple, mainly gray and white, with tiled roofs in typical Japanese style, but the environment is great, with fresh air, green mountains, and clear water, and the closer to the center, the higher the concentration of spirit particles. Without realizing it, Uehara Hakuha had completed his daily tasks. He received the rewards of swordsmanship +1, spiritual pressure +1. It feels good to get stronger every day without even trying. Now the only special task on the task panel is, witness the birth of the visor. Uehara Hakuha came to the White Gate to complete this special task. Chapter 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as Shiroha Uehara stepped through the White Gate, he saw a group of Soul Reapers heading toward the Rukongai district. These Shinigami were all built like brick houses, some sporting rooster comb haircuts, looking like tough guys or bikers. Across the backs of their robes were written the characters Rokugura Sujiban. Leading them was none other than the captain of the 9th Division, Kensei Rokuguroma. Besides this guy, practically the gold standard for Shinigami combat power, Shiroha Uehara also recognized 2 other faces. One was the 9th Division's lieutenant, Kyunin Haku, a big-hearted green-haired girl with a mean right hook. The other lurked in the shadows, nearly invisible, none other than the blind monk Tozen Kaname, the 5th seat of the 9th Division. Back then, Tozen Kaname wasn't rocking the shades and dreads he'd later be known for. Instead, he had an afro just like the 7th Division captain, Love Ikawa. Most of his face was hidden by a plain white mask, only revealing his closed eyes. This was just an ordinary mask, not a hollow mask. Uehara Shiroha simply glanced at them and moved on, acting as if he hadn't seen anything. He knew Kensei Mugiroma was personally investigating the disappearances in Rukongai. This was the spark that ignited the holification incident. Aizen had silently cast a wide net over the captains of the Godai 13, and they hadn't even noticed, but this time, Uehara Shiraha intended to throw Aizen a curveball to amp up his own power. On a street near the Hakudo Gate, Uehara Shiraha was taking a leisurely stroll. Suddenly, he frowned slightly, looking towards the shadows. Noticing Uehara Shiraha's gaze, a silver-haired boy emerged. The boy wore a Shinigami uniform, with a 5th Division armband on his right arm. The silver-haired boy smiled at Uehara Shiraha, saying, "Uehara-kun, long time no see." But even though the silver-haired boy was smiling, he gave off a cold vibe, like being watched by a venomous snake. "It's Jin Ikamaru. After all this time, you're still the same, always looking at people with your eyes closed. Guess that's what makes a genius a genius." Uehara Shiroha sighed as he spoke. He and Jin Ikamaru had been classmates, but only briefly. Jin Ikamaru graduated in a year and became a ranking officer in the 5th Division on graduation day. Uehara Shiraha took 6 years to graduate, so, Jin Ikamaru was a true genius, while Uehara Shiraha was just an ordinary cheater. Uehara-kun, you're still so amusing. Teased by Uehara Shiraha, Ikamaru Jin's foxy face showed a more obvious smile. Although Ikamaru Jin and Uehara Shiraha had only been classmates for 1 year, he still knew a thing or two about Uehara Shiraha, namely, that this guy never took the straight and narrow path. While others studied and trained hard, Uehara Shiraha would go fishing one day, shopping the next, maybe even sneak out for a drink. Others thought Uehara Shiraha lacked motivation and was wasting his potential, but Ikamaru Jin felt that Uehara Shiraha possessed inexplicable confidence and self-assurance. It was just a hunch, and even he wasn't sure. Still, it made Ikamaru Jin pay attention to Uehara Shiraha. Facing Ikamaru Jin's probing, Uehara Shiraha laughed and said seriously, "I heard Vice Captain Aizen thinks highly of you and promoted you to a high-ranking officer. You should know that Vice Captain Aizen is one of the few stand-up guys in Seoul society. Jin-san, you've gotta work hard and not disappoint an honest man." While spouting nonsense, Uehara Shiraha had already guessed why Ikamaru Jin was here. Ikamaru Jin was most likely keeping an eye on Kensei Rokuguruma and his squad. Given Jin's cautious nature, he shouldn't be showing himself, he was probably testing him. Uehara Shiraha handled Ikamaru Jin's silent test with ease. Hearing Uehara Shiraha's outrageous words, Ikamaru Jin just nodded with a smile, even feigning gratitude towards Aizen, but Ikamaru Jin's eyes deepened as he spoke. He was a bit puzzled. Was Uehara Shiraha really so shallow? After a fruitless test, Ikamaru Jin could only smile and wave goodbye to Uehara Shiraha. Back in Rukongai, Kensei Rokuguruma and the Shinigami from Squad 9 stared at the scattered Shinigami with shock. He'd just saved a kid named Shuhei Hisagi from a hollow, but strangely, there was no sign of a Senkaman being opened nearby. Where had this hollow come from? Then, they found 10 empty Shinigami uniforms, perfectly clean. That was the same number of Shinigami in the advanced team. The uniforms were like complete shells, with the belts still wrapped around them. It made you wonder, how did the Shinigami get out of them? There were even tabi socks inside the fallen straw sandals, as if their feet had simply vanished. This scene was identical to the missing civilians earlier. When Soul Reapers die, their clothes disintegrate into spirit particles and disappear along with them, so, this bizarre event could only be classified as a disappearance. After the advanced team Shinigami arrived, the phenomenon not only continued, but spread to them. Thinking this, Rokuguruma Kensei felt uneasy and immediately issued urgent orders to his team. Okijima, report to the 46 immediately. Tell them that all 10 Shinigami from the advanced team are missing and that their disappearance is the same as the missing residents of Rukongai. Fujido, contact Squad 12. Tell them to send their tech specialists ASAP to seal off the area and conduct a thorough investigation. Kashiro, get everyone ready. We're camping out here tonight. After giving the last order, Rokuguruma Kensei looked determined. No matter who was playing games, they wouldn't be allowed to bypass Squad 9 and hurt innocent people. Except for Konami-Bai's complaints, the other members of Squad 9 set up camp without hesitation, sticking with their captain. After a while, Fujido returned with news that the lieutenant of the 12th Division, Hiyori, was on her way. As for the captain of the 12th Division, Kasuke Urahara, he was occupied with secret technical research. Hearing this, Rokuguruma Kensei finally looked relieved. Night fell, and Rokuguruma Kensei patrolled the area again. When he returned to his tent, he found Konami-Bai sound asleep. Rokuguruma Kensei shook his head. Only Konami-Bai could sleep soundly. Suddenly, Rokuguruma Kensei heard a scream from outside the tent. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In Rukongai, Kensei Rokuguruma heard the screams and bolted from the tent, Zanpakuto in hand. He was met with a bloodbath. 2 members of the 9th Division Night Watch lay dead, the ground soaked crimson with their blood. Team member Fujido stood nearby, Zanpakuto in hand, frozen in place. The full moon cast a stark, cold light, but couldn't cool the rage-consuming Kensei Rokuguruma. These men had trusted him, and now they were dead. Fujido. Kensei's eyes burned red. His Zanpakuto responded to his will, initiating Shirkai. Scatter, Kazashini. Kensei took a step, ready to attack, but he stopped short. Blood suddenly erupted from Fujito's neck, and he collapsed. Kensei immediately understood Fujito's Zanpakuto was clean. It wasn't him. The scream hadn't come from the fallen guards, but from Fujito himself. A cold dread gripped Kensei. This was a trap. A trap for the Soul Reapers, maybe even just for him, the captain. Wake up. His first thought was for Kyunenbai, still asleep in his tent. He started to back away, intending to get Bai out of danger, but then darkness slammed down on him, followed by a sudden return to normal vision. Before he could figure out what was happening, his body went weak, and a searing pain shot through his chest. Looking down, he saw a thin, sharp blade protruding from his chest, clutching his Zanpakuto. Kensei forced himself to look back, his eyes widening in disbelief. Why? The full moon continued its silent, cold watch over the carnage. Meanwhile, back at the 1st Division barracks, Uehara Shiraha played with his camouflage glasses, patiently waiting. Disguise glasses, grade, B-class, type, tech ability, upon wearing, completely alters appearance, image, spiritual pressure, temperament, voice, scent, and even the soul's essence. Details. 1. Kryptonian tech, acquired after completing Special Mission 5, join the Godai 13. 2. Glasses on, I'm a harmless reporter. Glasses off, I'm a god. Uehara planned to use the glasses to complete a special mission and make some waves. Even a B-class item was powerful. The effect was close to Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu. Soon, a frantic voice reached his ears. Emergency! Emergency! An emergency has occurred. Captain Kensei Rokuguruma and Vice Captain Hisanami of the 9th Division have vanished. All captains report to the 1st Division headquarters immediately. Uehara's heart leaped. Finally, Rokuguruma and the others have been caught. The opportunity he'd been waiting for was here. He created a shadow clone. He deactivated them all earlier, so this was the first of the day. It didn't need glasses. It could cover for him inside the Soul Society. Perfect alibi, don't you think so, Aizen? Inside the room, the two Ueharas nodded and smiled at each other. Then the real Uehara put on the glasses and instantly transformed. The next instant, Danku began to open a spatial pathway. Uehara, his appearance utterly changed, entered a virtual state and moved into Danku's space. In this state, he could freely enter and exit, enabling him to make short spatial jumps. It used up spiritual pressure. But with his third-class reserves, it was nothing. The space was mostly empty, with a corner containing necessities. Among them were several sets of high-end fishing gear and 2 styles of clothing, shoes, and socks. Uehara grabbed a pre-prepared white windbreaker and swapped it for his Shinigami robes. He checked himself in a small mirror. A handsome, black-haired, middle-aged man with frameless glasses stared back. Damn, even disguised, I'm still good-looking, but a bit shorter. Since the disguise was fixed, he'd made sure to have the right clothes and shoes ready. He hadn't even bought them. He'd just borrowed them from a noble's house. No one would ever trace it back to him. After all, he was going to be dealing with, when 2 masters faced off, details were everything, the rest was easy. As the captains rushed to the 1st Division, Uehara, in his white coat, was already headed to Rukongai. In his virtual state, he slipped through barriers and moved through space. He moved fast, ignoring obstacles and patrolling Shinigami as if they weren't there. Soon, Uehara was through the Soul Society's barrier and into Rukongai. The defense that the Godai 13 and the nobles relied on was useless against him. Under the moonlight, Uehara focused his spiritual perception and found 2 strange spiritual signatures. He changed direction and headed straight for them. Back at the 1st Division headquarters, the Shinigami captains understood the gravity of the situation. These powerful figures at the top of the Soul Reapers were grim. Even the usually carefree and lazy Shunsui Kairaku was serious. The captain of the 8th Division's eyes were sharp and focused. In a short time, an entire squad had lost contact, and the captain and vice captain of the 9th Division had vanished. Aside from Captain Commander Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, who remained calm, the other captains were shaken. They were worried, confused, and felt the pressure. This attack was too sudden and too strange. Kisuke Uehara, captain of the 12th Division, sensed something was deeply wrong. he just couldn't break away to investigate himself. Yamamoto, leaning on his cane of spiral pine, stood like an unshakable mountain. The old man began to issue orders. Captain Rojuro Odoribashi of the 3rd Division, Captain Hirako Shinji of the 5th Division, and Captain Aikawa Reizake of the 7th Division, head to the scene for rescue. Captain Shihuin Yoruchi of the 2nd Division, stand by. Captain Kachiki Jinrei of the 6th Division, Captain Kairaku Shunsui of the 8th Division, and Captain Yukitake Jushiro of the 13th Division, guard the Suriidii with me. Captain Unohana Retsu of the 4th Division, prepare to receive casualties. Chapter 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After the initial squad mobilized, an emergency rescue team was assembled. It consisted of 5 members, Fengqiao Lejuro, Pingzi Mako, Kawa Luo, Yamamaru Lisa, and the deputy head of the Demon Arts Corps, Morishita Bokujin. Standing at the first squad's entrance, Uehara Shiraha watched them rush off, thinking. Just like I remember, 3 captains, 1 lieutenant, and the deputy head of the Demon Arts Corps, a master of spells and incredibly strong. That's a team that could take on Hueco Mundo. Too bad they're about to run into Aizen, the hairspray enthusiast. But Hara Shiraha wasn't too worried about his shadow clones. The way he remembered it, even though this group would be hollowified and become the Visors, none of them actually died. They just chilled in the human world for 100 years or so. For a Soul Reaper, a century is like 10 years to a human, no biggie. Just a long vacation. Just then, Kairaku Shunsui appeared. For once, he looked dead serious. Something wrong, Shunsui? This isn't like you, the Shadow Clone Uehara Shiraha asked, playing dumb. He wasn't concerned about being exposed. Even though the 2nd Hokage's Shadow Clone technique is only a B-rank skill, it's still ridiculously powerful. In Naruto, not even a Byakugan or a 6 Paths powerhouse like Otsutsuki Kagaya could tell the difference between a Shadow Clone and the original. Kairaku Shunsui looked up at the Shadow Clone Uehara Shiraha. Finally, the question that had been nagging him for a while came out. What do you think of Aizen? That he immediately regretted saying it and shook his head. Never mind. Maybe I'm just paranoid. Hirako Mako had mentioned having doubts about Aizen. Then this terrible incident happened in Rukongai. Kairaku Shunsui couldn't help but connect the dots. Something wrong with Lieutenant Aizen? Nah, that's impossible, right? How could someone so perfect be a problem? The Shadow Clone Harabayu said with feigned confusion, scratching his head. Hearing this, Kairaku Shunsui considered it, then said, come with me. He used Flash Step, and the Shadow Clone Harabayu followed. Soon, they arrived at the 5th Division barracks. There, Kairaku Shunsui saw Aizen, who just happened to be passing by. Aizen, with his plain black glasses and generic haircut, gave a polite salute to Kairaku Shunsui. To Kairaku Shunsui, this Aizen looked perfect, from his appearance and voice to his height, Zanpakuto, and spiritual pressure. He seemed to be the real deal. But to the Shadow Clone Harabayu, the other guy was just someone who looked roughly like Aizen, a cheap imitation. That's the power of Kyoka Suigetsu, complete hypnosis, controlling the 5 senses and even spiritual perception. At every opening and graduation ceremony at the Spiritual Arts Academy, Aizen would release his Zanpakuto and claim that Kyoka Suigetsu was just a water-type Zanpakuto. Uehara Hakuha knew the story and wasn't buying it. He always sent a shadow clone to classes and events, so he was never affected by Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu. The shadow clone Uehara Hakuha greeted the fake Aizen as if nothing was wrong. Lieutenant Aizen, still working this late? You must be putting in overtime. Gotta sell the act. The devil is in the details. After that, Kairaku Shunsui and Uehara Shiraha left the 5th Division barracks. Kairaku Shunsui looked embarrassed. Looks like Aizen's fine. I was just overthinking it. Anyone would be on edge after something like this, Uehara Hakuha said, thinking the other Soul Reapers weren't worried enough. They'd been alive for centuries or even millennia, and they still let Aizen develop his scheme right under their noses. Were these captains just getting lazy after all this time? Or was Aizen just that good? Meanwhile, Uehara Hakuha was already at the scene, waiting for the show to start. At the Technical Development Bureau, Uehara Kisuke donned his latest invisibility cloak and rushed to the scene under the cover of darkness. At the same time, in District 57 of West Rukongai, Hiyori Saragaki, who had arrived as backup, was already struggling. Her small body was covered in cuts and bruises, and sweat poured down her face. Even her normally aggressive blonde pigtails were drooping. Glancing at the badge on her left shoulder representing her position as the lieutenant of the 12th Division, she gritted her small teeth. Then, a massive black shadow descended, radiating a terrifying aura. An incredibly powerful and cold spiritual pressure swept across the area like a storm. Instantly, Hiyori Saragaki felt like she was drowning in a sea of blood and corpses. She felt that ominous, cold, and violent spiritual pressure. Again, the spiritual pressure of a hollow. But the humanoid hollow in front of her gave Hiyori a chilling feeling of familiarity. Hiyori Saragaki didn't have time to think. Instinctively, she released her own spiritual pressure to cast a Kido. Binding spell number 37, suspending star, that she waved her right hand, creating a glowing blue net. It enveloped the humanoid hollow charging at her. The humanoid hollow swung its claws and easily tore through the net. Then, it leaped high, its bone-armored fists hurtled down toward Saragaki Hiyori. Even before the fists landed, a violent gust of wind buffeted her face. The huge body of the humanoid hollow blocked the moonlight, making Saragaki Hiyori's petite form look even smaller. The terrifying spiritual pressure cut off her escape routes. Saragaki Hiyori, not daring to use her full strength, was trapped. Just as she was about to get seriously hurt, a cold, lazy voice cut through the air. You're only using binding spells on a hollow, Hiyori. When did you get so soft? As the voice trailed off, a flash of light blocked the falling fists, saving Hiyori. With a single strike, Hirako Mako unleashed his full captain-level spiritual pressure, forcing the humanoid hollow to back off. Aikawa Ratake, Fengxiao Rojuro, and Yamamaru Lisa followed closely behind. Arisada Bokujin, skilled in demon arts but slow on his feet, lagged behind. Nearby, Baiyu Uehara, hidden in the empty space, sensed the spiritual pressure of Mako Hirako and the others. He sighed in relief. They're finally here. That even though Baiyu Uehara had set out with Mako Hirako, he'd arrived long before. He'd even had time to style his hair with some Gao Chicheng-style side bangs. In this day and age, it was a trend-setting look. Then, Baiyu Uehara started thinking about what rewards he'd get this time. A Super Saiyan bloodline would be nice, or the 9-Tomo Rinnegan would be good too. If not, a 6-gem Infinity Gauntlet would do. I'm not picky. At that moment, Hiyori, who had just escaped danger, didn't yell at Hirako Mako. She said in a dejected tone, I can only use binding spells. I can't do anything else. Hirako Mako and the others were stunned. Isn't killing hollows what Soul Reapers do? What did she mean? She couldn't do it. Chapter 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Just as Mako Hirako and the others were stunned, a colossal, humanoid hollow lumbered into view. It was then they got a good look at it, and froze. Again, even though it was massive, with bone armor on its arms and a stark white, square mask obscuring its face, Mako Hirako, Rojuro Otoribashi, Love Aikawa, and Lisa Yadamara still recognized the hollow standing before them. Is that Kensei? But this spiritual pressure, that mask, it's all wrong. Can that really be Kensei? Their faces hardened, disbelief etched across them. They didn't want to believe it was Kensei, but the white captain's Hiyori and the black 69 emblazoned on his chest and abdomen confirmed the horrifying truth. Kensei or not, we have to draw our swords. Hirako Mako gripped her Zanpakuto with both hands. The Kensei-like hollow unleashed a terrifying wave of spiritual pressure. The fight was on. As if struck by a sudden thought, Hiyori shouted, Watch out, Hirako. Kensei's acting completely out of it. Once the battle began, Hirako Mako understood Hiyori's warning. Kensei couldn't use his Zanpakuto and seemed mindless, but his bone armor was incredibly tough, and his punches packed a devastating wallop. Reluctant to go all out against a former comrade, Hirako Mako held back. This restraint put him at a disadvantage. Seeing the situation, Love Aikawa and Rojuro Otoribashi jumped in to help. The three Shinigami captains fought together, barely managing to contain the rampaging Kensei. Then, out of nowhere, Mashiro Kuna, who had been missing, burst onto the scene. White bone armor covered her legs like Kensei's, and a black and white mantis mask hid her face. Her spiritual pressure had become a violent surge, far surpassing anything a lieutenant should possess. The Shinigami were stunned again. After recovering from the shock, Lisa Yatamaru drew her sword and joined the fray. Hiyori, weakened from her earlier injuries, collapsed. Now, for Shinigami were battling Mashiro Kyuna and Kensei Rokujiro, who were virtually hollows. Even with a 4-on-2 advantage, the Shinigami were losing ground. Fortunately, at that moment, the lieutenant of the Kido Corps, Hachijin Ashoda, finally arrived. After a grueling struggle, they managed to help him unleash the forbidden technique 99, finally trapping Mashiro Kyuna and Kensei Rokujiro, but the battle had left Mako Hirako and the others battered and bruised, unnoticed by anyone. Hiyori Saragaki was undergoing a terrifying transformation, her consciousness was blurring. Pushing past some internal limit, Hiyori Saragaki's body erupted with a chilling spiritual pressure, and a grotesque black and white mask slammed onto her face. Hiyori's sanity was slipping away. Faced with Hiyori's sudden change, Mako Hirako, who was closest to her, cried out. Hiyori? Rojuro Odoribashi, Love Kawa, and Lisa Yatamaru stared, horrified, at Hiyori's hollow-like transformation. Then, darkness fell like a curtain. Instantly, the hearing, vision, smell, and even the spiritual sense of the 4 Shinigami and Hachijin Ashoda, vanished. What the hell is going on? Hirako, Rose, Lisa. Lost in the impenetrable darkness, Love Kawa gripped his Zanpakuto and desperately called out to his companions, but no sound came back. There was nothing but chaos, no light, no sound, nothing. Cold sweat soaked Love Kawa's already exhausted body. Then, agonizing pain shot through him. Before Love Kawa could react, a cold blade pierced his chest, and blood poured out. The darkness lifted, and Love Kawa lay helpless on the ground. Beside him, Hirako Mako, Rojuro Odoribashi, and Lisa Yatamaru were all sprawled out, grievously wounded. The faces of the 4 Shinigami reflected shock and despair, in the shattered space. Uehara Bayu opened another bag of his homemade potato chips. Only the captain of the 5th Division, Mako Hirako, could barely stay conscious. He struggled to look up. When he finally saw the attacker, Mako Hirako's eyes widened in horror. The figure wore a plain white mask, and a sharp blade in his hand dripped with blood. More disturbingly, he was wearing the uniform of the 9th Division. Reeling from the shock, Mako Hirako roared. Tozen Kaname. You were the one who attacked Hachijin, weren't you? Why? Why would you do this? Why did you betray us? He didn't betray you. Kaname has always belonged to me. A calm voice spoke from behind Hirako Mako. Hearing the voice, Hirako Mako, still lying on the ground, gasped and looked back. He saw the man he had suspected for so long, Aizen Sosuke. Behind Aizen stood the ever-smiling Jin Ikamaru. As Aizen appeared, Tozen Kaname bowed respectfully to Aizen. Lord Aizen. That at the same time, in the hidden space, Uehara Bayu was stoked. The real puppet master has arrived. It's time to get this show on the road. Facing the sudden appearance of Aizen, Hirako Mako gritted his teeth, his face contorted with rage. I knew something was up with you. That's why I kept you close, watched you every second. Aizen, wearing the 5th Division lieutenant's badge on his right arm, looked down at his battered captain, his expression calm. So, when did you first figure it out? Since you were in your mother's womb. Hirako Mako spat. Aizen wasn't fazed in the least, maintaining his polite tone. I see. You really are perceptive. But unfortunately, did you notice that it wasn't me who was following you this past month? What are you talking about? Hirako Mako's eyes widened, and a strange energy within his body flared. At that moment, Uehara Bayu, hidden in his hollow disguise, found a concealed spot and began to quietly observe the scene. He also cast a few ghost spells to further mask his spiritual pressure and presence. Over there, after explaining his Kyoka Suigetsu ability, Aizen deliberately provoked Hirako Mako. Hirako Mako seethed with anger, noticing a stream of white, alien substance flow from his mouth, solidifying into a partial hollow mask. Simultaneously, Love Kawa, Rojuro Odoribashi, Hiyori, Lisa Yatamaru, and Hachijin Ashoda, still unconscious on the ground, screamed in agony. Their bodies underwent the same transformation as Kensei and Mashiro Kyuna. At that moment, Hirako Mako realized that they were all just Aizen's test subjects. After recording some experimental data, Aizen drew his Zanpakuto, looked down at the kneeling Hirako Mako and said calmly. It seems the duration of hollowification isn't just linked to emotions, it varies from person to person. Thank you for your participation. I was able to gather some very interesting information. As experimental subjects, you have proven useful, but now, that is no longer needed. So, I apologize. Chapter 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Just as Aizen swung his sword at the hollowed Hirako Mako, Uehara Shiraha appeared from under a cloak and slashed at him. Aizen dodged at the last second, and only the 5th Division emblem on his right arm was clipped by the tip of Uehara Shiraha's blade. Then, the towering demon priest Tezai also appeared, standing beside Uehara Shiraha. They'd arrived silently, using a special cloak that Uehara had secretly developed to mask their spiritual pressure. Uehara Shiraha, Tezai. Aizen didn't panic at all seeing the sudden appearance of the two. Instead, he smiled. Looks like we have more company. Uehara Shiraha scanned the scene, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by a piercing coldness. Aizen, you've been experimenting on them, turning them into hollows. Hollows? I'm not sure what you mean, Captain Uehara. Aizen adjusted his glasses, feigning innocence. Did you use some strange contraption from the Research and Development Department to transform Hirako and the others? That's crossing the line. He's a captain I respect. Aizen. Uehara Shiraha, always composed, could no longer contain his rage. Behind Aizen, Ikemura Jin still wore a smile, his eyes narrowed in amusement. Tozen Kaname gripped his Zanpakuto, ready to strike. On the ground, Hirako Mako and the others howled, the hollow energy within them nearly overwhelming them. They were on the verge of becoming complete hollows. Let's begin. Aizen's eyes gleamed as he pushed up his glasses. Then, he shook his head. The so-called captains of the Soul Reapers are a joke. I'm not inflicting guilt on them, I'm giving them a gift, you understand, don't you, Uehara Shiraha? Seeing that Aizen wasn't even going to lift a finger, Uehara Shiraha wanted to rip him to shreds, but he couldn't abandon Hirako and the others. Uehara Shiraha and Tezai immediately worked together, using every trick they knew to stabilize the 8 hollowified Soul Reapers. Aizen simply watched, making no move. As expected of the Grand Kido Chief, Ikemura Jin said with a smile. He can use a level 90+ forbidden spell without chanting. Truly terrifying. As he spoke, he subtly moved away from Uehara Shiraha and Tezai. The next second, Uehara Shiraha whirled around, his voice icy. Aizen, you're next. Tezai, who just unleashed powerful Kido, also focused on Aizen. Aizen smiled faintly. I'm afraid I won't be fighting you. You've already served your purpose. At that moment, Uehara Baiyu breathed a sigh of relief, watching Hirako Mako and the others complete their transformation. The special mission was complete, and he'd get his reward as soon as the system registered it. Uehara Baiyu was thrilled. He was one step closer to being unstoppable. Seeing the tense standoff, Uehara Baiyu activated his teleportation ability and slipped out of the space unseen. Then, he stepped out of the shadows into plain sight, gazed at the huge golden full moon, and sighed. The moonlight tonight is beautiful. It's because the night is so nice that everyone gathered together, drank and talked, and drew their swords. Looks like I picked the wrong time to show up. Uehara Shiraha, Tezai, Tozen Kaname, and Ikemura Jin were all startled by Uehara Baiyu's sudden appearance. Except for the hollowified Soul Reapers on the ground, none of them had noticed him approach. It was as if he'd materialized out of thin air. Could he be another one of Aizen's helpers? Perhaps our guest would care to introduce himself. That even though he was surprised by the unexpected newcomer, Aizen didn't lose his composure. Uehara Baiyu, not one for pretentious displays, said, My name is Otsutsuki Naruto. My family, the Otsutsuki, are tree planters by trade, environmentalists for generations. I'm the sole heir, so you can call me Prince. Aizen frowned, thinking. The Otsutsuki clan? I don't recognize that name from either the Siriidii or the Rukongai. Tozen. At Aizen's command, Tozen moved. In a flash, he was behind Uehara Baiyu, swinging his blade. Tozen, ruthless and silent, plunged his Zanpakuto into Uehara Baiyu's kidney, piercing him through. Uehara Baiyu looked down at the blade protruding from his abdomen, a look of shock and confusion on his face. How is this possible? But with that, he suppressed his spiritual pressure, feigning a serious injury. Even though his enemy was on the ground, Tozen felt something was off, it didn't feel right, and he didn't smell blood. Without hesitation, he gripped his Zanpakuto and twisted it violently. The onlookers were confused by Tozen's hesitation. After all, Tozen was blind, and they hadn't expected someone to play such a childish trick. From their perspective, Tozen hadn't actually hurt Otsutsuki Naruto at all. Tozen's determined sword had passed right through Otsutsuki Naruto's body without blood or wound, as if it had cut through air. There's no spiritual pressure fluctuation, so it's not Kido. It must be a Zanpakuto Bankai, an illusion. Tensai muttered, confused. Uehara Kisuke frowned. It can't be as simple as an ordinary illusion. Is it a Zanpakuto ability? At that moment, Tozen Kaname realized he'd been fooled, and his expression twisted behind his mask. He had failed to meet Lord Aizen's expectations. How humiliating. Enraged, Tozen Kaname unleashed his spiritual pressure. Bankai, purifying insect's final style, Griller Grillo. In an instant, Uehara Bayu's world went dark. It wasn't just his vision, his senses of smell, sound, taste, and even spiritual perception vanished, leaving only the sense of touch that could feel pain. This was Tozen Kaname's Bankai. Uehara Bayu shrugged and returned directly to the broken space. After releasing his Bankai, Tozen Kaname was ready to avenge his earlier humiliation, but he found himself drawing his sword and looking around, filled with confusion. Where had he gone? How could he be unable to sense his enemy after unleashing his Bankai? At that moment, Tozen Kaname felt that the decorative mask on his face was a perfect fit. Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next second, Uehara Bayu teleported to safety, easily dodging Tozen Kaname's Bankai. You've got some impressive skills, Aizen remarked to Uehara Bayu before vanishing. In an instant, Aizen reappeared in front of Uehara Bayu, his hand raised. Heido number 90, Black Coffin. A terrifying wave of spiritual pressure erupted. The air itself shimmered and warped. The immense spiritual pressure formed a suffocating black coffin around Uehara Bayu. Inside, a swirling vortex of dense spiritual energy began to distort space. Aizen. A flicker of alarm crossed Uehara Kisuke's eyes beneath his hat. This guy's hiding way too much. He acts like he's not good at anything, but he's secretly a master of everything. A true jack of all trades. Wu Ling Tasai was equally stunned. A lieutenant, casting a level 90 Heido without the incantation. It's incredible, that what Aizen could do, he could also do as a high priest of Kido, but, he specialized in Kido, while Aizen was supposedly just an ordinary lieutenant, and this might not even be Aizen's full power. Just how much is he concealing? Aizen, not even waiting for the black coffin to dissipate, sighed. Admirable power. Forgive me, but I have other matters to attend to tonight, so I must cut our time short. Kaname. Jin. Let's go. Without even glancing at the two Ueharas watching him intently, he turned and walked away. Tozen Kaname silently followed. Ikemara Jin's eyes narrowed, a sinister smile playing on his lips. Lord Aizen, shouldn't we make sure? If he's still breathing, I can finish the job. Aizen replied softly without looking back. Jin, if the Soul Society were only filled with the mediocre, this world would be a pathetic place. When I ascend to my rightful throne above the heavens, there will be plenty groveling at my feet. Soon, Aizen and his group melted into the darkness. Uehara Bayu didn't emerge from the void, he simply wanted to experience the power and pressure of a top-tier captain firsthand, so, Uehara Bayu remained in a hollow state throughout the encounter. Survival came first. Aizen seemed to sense his ability and chose to disengage rather than risk a drawn-out fight. Meanwhile, Wu Ling Tasai was already using a forbidden time manipulation technique to save the 8 hollow-fied Shinigami. After the dust settled, Uehara Bayu slipped away, eager to collect his mission reward. Back in the Soul Society, Kairaku Shunsui wore a grave expression. Beside him, Uehara Shiraha, the Shadow Clone, played the part of a concerned friend. Noticing Uehara Shiraha's worried look, Kairaku Shunsui tried to reassure him. Bayu, don't worry. Lisa will definitely come back. At West Luhun Street, the real Bayou Uehara heard the system notification as he left the area. Ding. You have completed Special Mission 7 and received the A-level item Horse Talisman as a reward. A hexagonal, silver-white disc materialized in the system space. In its center was a blue horsehead talisman. Delighted, Uehara Bayou immediately extracted the horse talisman from the system. Horse talisman, level, A-level, type, magical creation, ability, reverses abnormal conditions and restores things to their original state. Description: 1. From Jackie Chan Adventures. One of the 12 talismans used by Shindu to ward off outside forces. 2. The host acquired this by completing Special Mission 7, witnessed the birth of the Visored. 3. Can even fix a parking lot destroyed by a tornado. Uehara Bayou studied the talisman's properties with satisfaction. He then sent the magical talisman into his broken space. The horse talisman's ability was similar to Crazy Diamond, Jasu Higashikata's stand. It was like being hit with a diamond-piercing mother punch that fixes any injury. In no way Orihime, the future god-tier healer, possessed a similar power. It didn't just heal, but reverse damage, akin to turning back time. From that day forward, Uehara Bayou not only had Wolverine-level self-healing but was also immune to toxins and abnormal status effects. All of Mayuri Kuratsuchi's black tech drugs and Zanpakuto abilities like Wabasuk's were now useless against Uehara Bayou. Even the Sternritter's hack script abilities were ineffective. For example, as not sphere, Nianzal Wizal's, wind, a skin Nak Luvar's the death dealing and so on. Even Kenpachi Zaraki, with his incredible durability, had nearly succumbed to Pranita Parnkyaza's parasitic ability. Ichibe Hyasub, who one-shot Yawatch with one swing, was brought down by a fatal dose of Askin's poison, earning the nickname Carpet Ichigo. With the horse talisman, Uehara Bayou no longer had to worry about being crippled by Sternritter abilities. After this special mission, he had gained another powerful trump card. Uehara Bayou's steps grew lighter, and he was in high spirits. As dawn approached, Uehara Bayou slipped back into the First Division's barracks undetected. The moment he entered his room, Uehara Bayou dismissed the Shadow Clone and stepped out of the broken space. Without a sound, Uehara Shiraha replaced the Shadow Clone with his real body. At the same time, a memory flooded his mind. After a quick review, Uehara Shiraha nodded in satisfaction. Asterisk as expected of me, flawless, star. The rest was now out of Uehara Shiraha's hands. It was the Central 46's own fault. Sure enough, events unfolded exactly as Uehara Shiraha had anticipated. The Central 46 ordered the execution of the 8 holofied Shinigami, and they also decided to punish Gurihei Tezsai for using forbidden time-space techniques and Uehara Kisuk for researching holofication. At the last moment, Captain Shihuan Yoruchi of the 2nd Division intervened, rescuing Uehara Kisuk and Gurihei Tezsai. The three of them fled the Soul Society along with the 8 holofied Shinigami and disappeared. The Central 46 promptly declared all 11 of them wanted criminals. Overnight, the Godai 13 lost 3 captains, 6 vice-captains, and both the chief and deputy chief of the Kido Corps. With only 13 captains in the Godai 13, almost half were gone. The news sent a wave of unease through the Soul Society. Even the nobles were shaken. Fortunately, head captain Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni remained, and his presence helped stabilize the situation. The nobles, of course, continued their music and dance.